Welcome back. Well, Governor Malloy and state lawmakers have taken steps, of course, to try and encourage business development, to encourage companies to create more jobs, to hire more people. Not everyone agrees on how to do it, of course, but they did go back into special session this past fall, and they passed a comprehensive and expansive jobs package. State Comptroller Kevin Lembo wants to make sure that some of the policies, including the special tax credits, actually work. Tell me about your ideas.
Thanks, Lori. Well, look, it's not just the job creation bill. You know, it goes back many, many decades. Connecticut's budget has many tax expenditures, as they're known, and those include everything from credits on sales tax or things we don't pay sales tax on to large incentive-based opportunities for businesses to create or retain jobs, for example. All of those are revenues deferred from state coffers, and so we need to be really clear that the investments we're making in that way are actually paying a return for the state.
So have we been remiss in making sure that they're working prior to this, or?
I think there's inadequate information to really make an assessment on whether some of these tax credits are working or not. So it's about time that we cataloged them all, took a look at what they were supposed to do when they were put into law, and make sure that they're still doing that, and then make a decision about where you go from there. You know, it's not going to be a simple decision of do we continue to do this or not, but rather potentially do we modify what we're doing in a way to build industry and incentivize the creation of jobs that we really want in Connecticut for the future. So
that seems like a very big task, because you'll have to identify each of the policies and then see how they were offered, and then, I mean, it's a quantitative thing. I mean, did it work? Did it bring X amount of dollars?
That's exactly right. That's right. It's really a data-driven exercise, and my hope really is that once the governor and the legislature make their appointments to this committee that already exists in statute, that they're able to approach this in a way that's really about the data. Let the data drive our decision-making, and try to protect ourselves as much as we can from the external interests that may have a say.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, you can say we want it to be data-driven, but we all know that it's politically driven as well. I mean, people, I mean, how do you keep the politics out of this kind of review?
Well, look, it's all basically sort of steeped in a political environment, so you can't escape it completely, but it's what you do with the data at the end of the day. So as long as we're clear and honest about the data that we find and report it that way, then it will move on to lawmakers, to policymakers, and the governor to make decisions about what they're going to do. I hope we can make recommendations, but yeah, I mean, some of these have significant lobbying presence at the Capitol, and they're going to have an interest in what work the committee is doing. I should also point out that I actually haven't been appointed to the committee, but I'm lobbying myself to get an appointment to that committee.
So who is on the committee?
At this point, there are no named people on the committee except the co-chairs of the Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committee of the legislature. The governor gets an appointment, and then the 6 legislative leaders all get appointments as well.
And those would be people, I mean, not necessarily lawmakers, right?
Not necessarily. There is no limitation on who those appointing authorities can place in those seats.
How long would something like this take?
Well, it's obviously, it should be an annual review. So the statute right now says that they'll do an initial look and then report annually thereafter. So whether those same people will be at the table throughout, I don't know the answer to that, but there's enough work and it'll go on for some time.
So one of the biggest things that businesses fought for was you changed the way that they have to pay, right? The business tax credit, is that what it is?
There were a number of changes in the jobs bill that the governor and the legislature passed, correct.
One of the most controversial among them was, I guess one of the programs that's the most controversial, I should say, is the First 5 program, the governor's First 5 program. Some Republicans particularly think that it concentrates too much on big business. So is it too early to tell whether that's efficient or productive at this point?
Well, the good news about the later tax incentives and items like that were put into place is that they have benchmarks built into them, very clear, and also oversight by the Department of Economic and Community Development. So those newer ones actually have a mechanism built in. It's really the older ones that are of greatest concern for me, but we need to look at them all together. So whether it's First 5 or the film tax credit or you know, other smaller incentives or credits that are in there, you know, you need to look at them all together. Again, $5.35 billion altogether.
Right. So the film tax credit is another one that people always talk about whether we have really seen an industry build up around that.
Right, and that as you follow the evolution of that conversation, there was an initial point where most people would say, well, why are we doing this? Why are we spending money on this? And then there was a preliminary analysis that said, well, these camera crews are sort of coming into state, doing something, getting a credit and leaving, and maybe buying a sandwich while they're here. Is that really what we want? But now you see it evolving further, where you see bricks and mortar sort of springing up, in part drawn by this credit. The other issue about that, and I'm not defending the film tax credit, I'm just saying that it takes time sometime for it to take hold. The other issue is that many states have film tax credits. So at what point are you in competition with Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New Jersey for the same production? So the bricks and mortar are critical, but at the same time we need to keep pace and figure out what's going on with them, not only geographically, but in our own state.
Are there other ones that spring to mind, other policies or programs that spring to mind for you that you automatically think, well, we need to look at that one?
You know, there's a whole, the Office of Fiscal Analysis puts out a report, and it's not complete, but it's got a lot of good information about this issue in it. And there's one category of tax expenditures that are essentially categorized as expedient. And it says right in the description, these are tax credits that really have no basis in any measurable change in the economic development. They're just sort of there, and frankly, we're not sure why they're there. So those are the ones where you need to look first. You know, some of them are small, some of them are sales tax exemptions on things like puzzle books. You know, so that's a small thing, but you need to wonder, you know, was it just a lobbyist who, you know, was able to get that put in for their client at some point? But we need to look at them.
If there is money to be saved, what would we do with it?
Well, you know, that'll be a decision for those who make the budget and sign off on it. That is the governor and the legislature. But I think the committee, once it's formed, can reasonably make recommendations about moving money from one place to another if it's shown to produce a better value, or they may just, you know, have no recommendation and just identify it as a savings in the tax expenditure area, and then leave it to the legislature and the governor to decide what they want to do from there. Maybe they just want to put it back into the stream of the budget and use it to close another gap.
So what do you have to do now? What's the next step?
We're asking the legislators and the governor to make their appointments quickly. I've already spoken to the co-chairs of the Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committee, so they're ready to go. We've offered our assistance. I'm lobbying for that seat on the committee, and then we'll get to work. And I'm hoping we'll be able to get a couple of months of work in before the legislature reconvenes in February and have something to say, even if it's really narrowly related to obstacles to getting the information necessary to measure the effectiveness of these things, which could be a problem.
Right, yeah. Well, I think the tenet, of course, is something that people, I think, would agree with. Most people would want to know that what we're doing here in the state is effective and productive.
Right, and look, we spend a lot of time talking about what we're spending money on in an appropriation. We debate that. It goes through the legislative process. We spend a lot of time talking about legislative and executive decisions to raise taxes in some areas. This is a whole other area that's essentially captured before it ever reaches the appropriations process. We need to talk about that as well.
Yeah, interesting. Kevin Lembo, thanks for being here.
It's good to be with you.
Thanks a lot. Well, coming up next, we're going to talk to some members of Occupy Hartford about where they go from here.